1, 2, 3, 4.
Sroei B'tach B'Hashem Sroei B'tach B'Hashem. You know, my friends, sometimes it makes me happy, but sometimes it makes me sad. Israel has no friends in the world. The Holy Land, the holy people of Israel are all alone. Ain't no hope, but you know what we have? Do you know what we have? We have one friend in heaven. And they'll never take our song away. Please join me. Ay Yisroel, Yisroel, Yisroel. We bet on above Hashem. Yisroel, Yisroel, Yisroel. hoyle mat chazecho ay 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 Shabbos mi lizoy Shabbos kodeshi mi lizoy Orefu ashleimo kiroi voloy Shabbos mi lizoy Shabbos kodeshi mi lizoy Orefu ashleimo kiroi voloy Shabbos mi lizoy Shabbos kodeshi mi lizoy Orefu ashleimo kiroi voloy Shabbos mi lizoy Shabbos kodeshi mi lizoy Orefu ashleimo kiroi voloy Shabbos mi lizoy Shabbos kodeshi mi lizoy Orefu ashleimo kiroi voloy Shabbos mi lizoy Shabbos kodeshi mi lizoy Orefu ashleimo kiroi voloy ay 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 Shabbos mi lizoy Shabbos kodeshi mi lizoy Orefu ashleimo kiroi voloy Shabbos mi lizoy Shabbos kodeshi mi lizoy Orefu ashleimo kiroi voloy Summer Orchestra
Hi everyone, this is Jewish Talk, coming to you from Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC, also streaming on the iHeart and iTunes app. This program is later archived on Spreaker.com. So hi there, my name is Rabbi Pearl. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This all depends on when you are listening. Let us begin. It's the month, we're into the first week of the month of Elul. Let us, as the tradition tells us, we blow the shofar to remind us of the upcoming high holidays of Rosh Hashanah and to prepare accordingly. May Hashem bless us all to be inscribed and sealed for a very good year, physically and spiritually. Today our subject is, can we become non-judgmental? Let me take you back to Jewish life in Eastern Europe in the 1700s. It was particularly a very precarious time. Outbursts of extreme violence directed at whole communities. The Jewish people were still reeling from the shock and the destruction left in the wake of many massacres, which left over 100,000 Jews dead across the Ukrainian landscape. Additionally, there was the failed messianic fervor of Shabtai Tzvi, who eventually converted to Islam. That dealt a crushing blow to the Jewish spirit and the morale from Europe to North Africa, all the way to the Middle East. Internally, the Jewish world was also at odds with itself and was coming apart at the seams. There was a social gap between the educated elite and the unlettered masses, which was seemingly a chasm which was impossible to bridge, leaving the majority to feel spiritually unworthy and incompetent, and relegating, the pursuit of God and learning to the privileged few Additionally, the Enlightenment was beginning to impact the lives of young intellectuals throughout Europe, causing many to leave religion and community behind in search of vaguely promised spiritual truths and individual freedoms. As a result, both the bodies and the souls were nearing total exhaustion, and basically we found ourselves on the verge of a breakdown. Along came a great healer, a teacher, the love of the Jewish people, known as the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement. He publicly appeared on the historical stage in the middle of the 18th century. Functioning as a spiritual first responder, the Baal Shem Tov sought to gently uplift the beaten and the battered person of his time, reviving them from their nearly pulverized state. In the face of suffering, he spread joy. In the face of power, he spread peace. And in the humble lives of simple persons, he sought to highlight the deepest sparks of divinity that we all have. So through a variety of innovative approaches, including songs, storytelling, simple faith, ecstatic spiritual practices, the Baal Shem Tov aimed at nothing less than a full-scale renewal of the Jewish spirit. To accomplish this, he turned to Kabbalah, the esoteric teachings, the spiritual secrets, inside out. He turned them inside out, sharing this with the masses, which was, again, something exclusive to individuals. And therefore, he sparked a popular revolution of piety and passion that still reverberates to this day. So let's fast forward now, almost 200 years, to 1951. Less than a decade after the horrors of the Holocaust, and a few years after the masses of Middle Eastern Jews that had been expelled from their home countries. This was the moment when the Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson, assumed his leadership, right from 770 Eastern Parkway. Similar to the times of the Baal Shem Tov, times of spiritual calamity, confusion, trauma, displacement had been sweeping the entire Jewish world. The horrors of the genocide and the forced expulsion were leaving people with profound and theological questions left unanswered. So again, just a few years after the Holocaust ended in 1945, the Jewish spirit and morale were in ruins. In addition to such geopolitical upheavals, assimilation and secularization, this was with everything going on. For the most part, religious Jews kept to themselves, as did secular and progressive Jews. Left to their own devices, this socio-spiritual chasm would have continued to grow, possibly stretching the seams of the Jewish people to the point of no return. So within this divided time, following the Holocaust, the Rebbe himself addressed first his immediate followers, but also he addressed the Jewish world as a whole, seeking to restore purpose, passion, cohesion, and the confidence to a broken and fragmented people. So towards this end, the Rebbe came up with a daring and risking strategy, which is best summarized by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, the former chief rabbi of England. And he says, what was the daring risk? And that is to search everyone out in love, the way they were once hunted down in hate. This led him to devise various programs to engage and energize the wider Jewish world outside of his own circle of followers and the religious community at large. This open-armed approach sought to extensionally expand the tents of holiness to make room for everyone, no matter their background, the level of knowledge or observance. So from this perspective, it became clear that Judaism is not so much a religion as it is a family. You're not a member of a family on account of your behavior. You're a member of a family in an irrevocable way. Even the wicked son, which is mentioned in the Haggadah, is still part of the family. Of course, it's always unfortunate when family members are estranged, but it doesn't make them any less family. We all have a seat at the table. According to Hasidus, every one of us has a soul which is essentially pure, incorruptible at its core. And nothing can ever sever the eternal bond with the divine. It is from that inner point of essence that the Rebbe sought to connect and build up each individual whom he encountered. 1951, there was a writer called Gershon Kranzler. He came to interview the newly appointed Rebbe on behalf of the Orthodox Jewish life to hear what his plans were for the future. Throughout the course of their conversation, in which the Rebbe laid out many of the core principles he would put into practice throughout the next 4 decades, he directly addressed this topic of reaching out to the non-observant Jewish communities based on the inherent soul connection that we all have. It's always been the belief of Chabad. There's not a single Jewish person, however he or she may think they've drifted from the center of Jewish life, who does not have some good point, some particular mitzvah that by nature or by inclination the person promotes. This spark of good in each person must be utilized for the good. What do you do? The Rebbe asked a young man who came to meet with him. And the student said, I'm a student at the university. I'm studying for a master's degree in education. And the Rebbe said, I too attended university many years ago. Somewhat surprised, the young man says, and what did you study? Theology? No. The Rebbe said, I studied electrical engineering. The Rebbe responded with a smile. But I prefer to turn on the lights in people's souls. Seeing the young man's confusion and curiosity, the Rebbe explained, you see, every human being has a soul, a divine spark that burns inside them. Sometimes a person moves away from their inner light. It might even seem that the light of their soul has been snuffed out. But the soul is like a pilot light. It never goes out completely. All it needs is for someone to turn up the flame, to ignite it into a blaze of illumination. This is my goal, to illuminate Jewish life through the soul by brightening and fanning its flame until it burns bright again. See, here we see the Rebbe stating his goal explicitly, to directly address the soul on its own terms and help rekindle its fire against all odds. In fact, it was this very belief and grounding in the soul that inspired the Rebbe to reach out and welcome all who crossed his path, whether in person or through one of his many emissaries across the globe. So, drawing a parallel between the times and the missions of the Baal Shem Tov and his own, the Rebbe once told a group of visiting Hillel students, we can understand what the Baal Shem Tov did through the relationship of an electric powerhouse with a lamp that is connected by a wire. It was the Baal Shem Tov's mission to explain and proclaim that every one of us, without exception, is connected with a powerhouse, and every one of them has a switch in their innermost depths that will be found if he search for it. So too, every one of us must try to find the switch in the soul of every one of us. One can never know what will make the connection, perhaps one word. But by this, you open up the well, the inner fountain of that person's soul. The Rebbe boldly insisted that all Jews alive after the Holocaust had the privilege and the responsibility to strengthen each other's soul expression and connection to God and the whole world. We all have something special to offer the world. You don't have to be a rabbi or a rebbe to do this holy work. Each of us possesses a unique God-given soul that can refrain the infinite light like no other. In the quest to uncover and unleash the power of the soul, one can choose to fixate on the darkness that surrounds it, or we can focus on the inherent light within it. Let me bring you forward. In January of 1962, a woman wrote to the Rebbe. She had been raised in a non-believing home. Now she had attended 2 lectures on Torah True Judaism that touched her deeply and presented her with a dilemma. In what should I believe? She asked the Rebbe. In the path along which I have been raised and educated over many years, or in that which I heard from a stranger in the course of 2 evenings? what I share with you is a freely translated reflection from the Rebbe's reply to this individual. Certainly you have heard of the expression return to roots. I'm sure that you are also aware that an education does not work in a vacuum, since in each and every individual there are spiritual dynamics that are rooted in the soul prior to the onset of the educational process, things that stem from the innermost heart of the soul. By the way, I'd just like to interject, when we're in our mother's womb, we are taught every aspect of Torah study. When we are born, we get a knock under an angel comes and knocks in the philtrum under the nose. That's why we have a little dent there, and we forget everything. But in truth, it's all been pushed into our subconscious. So even way before we start, kind of arriving to our parents, in the kind of education and the kind of locale and all the things that influence us in our earlier years, there is a pre-existing condition that's filled with the holiness of Torah and all of its meanings. They are inside in the heart of the soul. So no education or conditioning can change these things. They can only suppress them for a longer or shorter period of time. This has been repeatedly demonstrated in the fields of education as well as in medical science, biology, and other fields. This is the reason why we often see that a single lecture or short discussion in education of extremely brief duration can affect a most basic change in the person. All this person needed was a catalyst that would initiate the removal of whatever was covering him up, that which already existed in the inner reaches of his soul. So, what is the answer to your question? What should I believe? The very fact that you're so deeply impressed by what you heard in the course of 2 evenings attests to the fact that when our sages tell us thousands of years ago that we are believers and the children of believers, it is only that their faith might at times be obscured by foreign elements in the life's experiences. My hope is that these lines will suffice to shed light to the matter, wrote the Rebbe to this lady. The Rebbe sought to instill in all receptive hearts this kind of redemptive belief in the divine point that we all carry. This helped inspire, initiate miraculous return of so many in the life of Jewish life in the world in the second half of the 20th century. In many ways, this belief was predicated on the viewpoint that the faith, the spiritual state, and the ultimate value in God's eyes are not something that one must earn as a reward. Rather, they must be claimed as an inheritance. It's there. It's part of our. So the Rebbe's overwhelming message was, you already belong. You're already holy. You're already loved. Now you too must love. By loving, help others feel they also too, belong. George, let me just share with you, George Rohr is a businessman who actively supports many Lubavitch activities. He once shared with the Rebbe that he had organized a Rosh Hashanah service for 130 Jews who had no Jewish background. No background, the Rebbe repeated, looking at Mr. Rohr. What do you mean? He thought the Rebbe didn't understand. And again, he said 130 Jews came and they had no background. The Rebbe said to him, go back and tell them they most definitely have a Jewish background. They are the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This very point that even a person with little or no traditional learning, experience, or observance has a place not just at the table, but at the head of the table, was really the cornerstone of the Rebbe's curriculum for the communal rejuvenation and the spiritual renaissance that we all see. Once again, we see the Rebbe focusing on the inherent light of the soul rather than on the religious behavior or accomplishments of defining a person. All of us are an illustrious child of our holy patriarchs and matriarchs, with equal access to the spiritual inheritance they bequest us. This was the Rebbe's empowering message to those who felt far away from any meaningful Jewish life or identity. At the same time, the Rebbe was telling the multitudes of those who are religious that they aren't as separate as they think. because we're all bound together with each other. So, in the Rebbe's own words, at the beginning of his leadership was, my mission statement is to communicate the essential truth. The love of Torah and God is all connected to love of your fellow. It's not this is something. You cannot have one without the other. If you truly love God, you must love your fellow. True love of fellow must be predicated on the holiness that exists. So, echoing the Baal Shem Tov, time and again we find examples of the Rebbe reminding the more observant amongst our people, reminding us of the enduring soul that exists inside of every one of us, regardless of their external life experiences and the choices made up to that point. In fact, the idea is that we're all God's children, and no one other than God can judge the state of another's soul, has always been the fundamental principle of Hasidic teachings over the centuries, as we've seen from a number of stories. And I will conclude with one story. A group of representatives from a well-known Jewish outreach organization once visited the Rebbe and sought his blessing for their work and they used the word kiruv rechokim, which means bringing close those who are far from Judaism. The Rebbe's face grew serious. I strongly object to this expression, he said. What do we know about who is close or far? Only God can judge these matters. He paused thoughtfully before continuing. Besides, no one is ever truly far from God. Instead, you should call it kiruv karovim, said the Rebbe with a smile, bringing those who are closer even closer. Based on the spiritually affirmative model and the method of his spiritual ancestor, the Baal Shem Tov, coupled with his undying love and concern for the soul in a world turned upside down, the Rebbe turned Judaism inside out, putting the soul front and center. From this place, all are holy, each in their own mysterious way. It is ultimately only when each lamp is lit, when each voice is heard, and when each soul is seen for what it truly is, that we will deeply know and understand that we all merit to be a light unto the nations. The Baal Shem Tov and the Rebbe, each in their own day and way, brought that day 1 hour closer through the unceasing love of Hashem, the Torah, and the whole world in its myriad expressions of ultimate unity and grace and recognition of each other. This is your host, Rabbi Pearl. Here's the sound of the soul once again. Have a great day.